Hello, my name is Larry Dobrow. I'm the editor-in-chief of MM+M, and I'm thrilled to plug into this episode of MM+M TV, a new video series in which we showcase members of the MM+M Agency 100. Today I'm joined by Kevin Troyanos, who is the head of analytics at Insagic, a Publicis Health company. Kevin, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to be talking a little bit about digital transformation and specifically Insagic's role and doing things, I think, differently and very innovatively in a place where we really haven't seen as much innovation as the technology would suggest we would be seeing.
Yeah, I mean, as the healthcare economy is really moving from a fee for service to a value-based approach, we feel that it's really important that we're putting data at the center of our business. Mm-hmm. Right? So leveraging data to use evidence to understand people as patients through the use of real-world data, through the use of real-world conversations, through the use of real-world dialogues, but also understanding who patients are as people. Yeah. Through the ability to tie that data in compliant ways with consumer data, so that we can start to understand the day in the life of folks, but also understand the realities that they face in the healthcare system. And if we bring these things together, it enables us to really start to think about better, more personalized content for unique individuals, so that no longer are we just sort of marketing to the average patient. Yeah. And we're really thinking about how do we bring the same degree of diversity in our communication strategies to different audiences, that we actually see in those different audiences. And so, we believe that it's really critical that we're bringing data, dialogue, and design at the center of that conversation. And those are some of the things that we're doing in Insagic today.
It's funny because that was going to be my first question, a little bit about the origin story, the superhero origin story for Insagic. The agency has been up for about 6 months now, 9 months now. Tell me a little bit about the process that birthed it, a little bit about the challenges, maybe even some of the roads that you went down that you decided not to pursue.
Sure. So we are a group that is for marketers, comprised of marketers. Mm-hmm. And that's really important because we have seen in the industry, there are a lot of shops that are focused on insights. And one of the things that we see a lot of is insights, really rich insights, living and dying in PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. And, what we have seen is, really the opportunity, because we're at the center of healthcare engagement within the Publicis Health family, mm-hmm. whether it's, how we're building better creative or how we're building better media strategies and actually activating them. We saw that there was an insight or an opportunity to bring those insights to the center of that business model. Mm-hmm. So that we could ensure that those great insights ultimately are activation ready from the start, right? So being an agency partner, you don't have the luxury of building a great sort of PowerPoint deck, lots of bells and whistles, leaving it on the client's desk, and then saying "see you later," right? Mm-hmm. We don't have that luxury because we're those brand partners, because we're along for that ride, alongside our clients. And so, as we built Insagic, part of what we were thinking was, how do we ensure that the way we're building all of the different ways we get to insights, ultimately we're thinking about that activation readiness from the very start. Okay. So those were some of the things that, as we sort of started to bring together multiple parts of our organization to form Insagic, those were some of our kind of core tenets.
Tell me, actually, that leads beautifully into my next question. Tell me a little bit about so many of the resources from the Publicis Health family that Insagic drew upon to create itself.
Sure. So, I started my career at Publicis Health about a decade ago with Saatchi and Saatchi Wellness. Mm-hmm. And when I was at Saatchi, we did a lot of work trying to bring new data science-driven solutions to market. That was a key piece of what I was really focused on, particularly thinking about how we drive that to better creative, mm-hmm. right? And understanding how we build better creative. Some of my counterparts at Publicis Health Media, who have worked in that business intelligence space, former colleagues of some of the large data providers, had been building some of the most innovative tools and techniques to drive real-world outcomes optimization.
Okay.
So thinking about how we use evidence to drive better optimization practices when we're thinking about media optimization. And so we brought those pieces together in combination with our sister agencies, Verilog and Insync. So Verilog, as many people know, has the world's largest real database of patient-doctor
actual
conversations. And Insync brings a lot of social science, ethnographic expertise, right? And so we had these disparate businesses, and we said, how can we really think about 1 + 1 = 10, as we're bringing these things together? Because ultimately, these are all different ways of looking at, understanding patients and understanding physicians through real evidence, right? And we believe that ultimately our marketers, they need evidence to bring products to market. But our clients are doing that, and so our point of view is we need to bring that same degree of evidence to how we're thinking about our audiences, right? So bringing evidence to the center of understanding differences in patient types, or understanding how to find them, or understanding the patient types that a physician is actually seeing, right? And understanding how that physician's practice is comprised of those patient types. We need to think about evidence in terms of how we're optimizing, right? In terms of, not optimizing to clicks, but optimizing to real outcomes. And ultimately, we need to also infuse that with real lived experiences, whether that's understanding patients from a social science perspective, or an ethnographic perspective, or understanding what is said and sometimes left unsaid in the doctor patient dialogue, right? And so our goal is to say, how can we bring this? How can we bring these components together to become a new, unique advisory practice at the center of Publicis Health to ensure that our clients are able to leverage that in the engagement value chain to ultimately drive the best outcomes for patients that we possibly can.
Right. You touched on this a little bit, but given Verilog, given Insync, how many other organizations could pull something like this together beyond Publicis Health? I mean, I don't think there are many.
I mean, we have been lucky over the years to have, I think, brought together some very unique assets.
And a lot of smart people.
Some very unique assets, and a culture of connectivity. That is one thing about the Publicis Health and Publicis Group family that I think is really really important. But we feel that that's having a combination of being able to understand audiences through the use of real world data and consumer data, being able to pair that up with what is a very unique asset in the Verilog Conversations data, but ensuring that we're really understanding the real lived experiences through a social science lens. If we can bring those pieces together, we can drive some, hopefully some new ways of thinking about insights in the market.
Largely, and you've touched on this already a little bit, the healthcare industry has been kind of slow to do a lot of the things that we've discussed so far. Why do you think that is? Why has transformation proven such an obstacle for so many organizations within the business?
It's difficult. It's difficult in health.
Yeah.
The healthcare industry in some ways has some of the best data of all industries, but in a lot of ways has some of the biggest limitations, right? And those limitations, one of those key limitations, which is a really important one, is regulatory compliance and privacy, right? And that needs to be at the center of how organizations leverage data, right? Some of our brethren in other industries have been driving data-driven marketing for eons at this point.
Yep.
Right?
Finance, banking, especially.
Exactly, or e-commerce, things like that, right? So, in our world, we need to make sure that that degree of data stewardship is put at the very center of our business, and that requires know-how. It also requires technology, and it requires the right processes. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen the same, sort of move towards, more data-driven, personalized marketing in healthcare as of yet, in the way that we've seen in other industries. But over time that will change, as the advent of some of these new approaches and these new ways of looking at data continue to evolve.
Are we on the cusp of transformation? How, if you're going to say, are we in the infancy? Are we in sort of the toddlerhood? Are we where are we in the transformation spectrum?
I think we're at an inflection point at this at the current moment. We're starting to see a lot more clients becoming considerably more agile in their marketing processes.
Yes.
Right. And so, we're seeing a lot more clients really starting to think about how do we ensure that we're not just putting a message out there to drive awareness, but ultimately we're thinking about marketing as a intervention strategy to drive healthcare engagement with the right people at the right time to help them live better, better lives, healthier lives, and better, and ultimately drive better outcomes. This requires a deep understanding of the differences in different groups, different patient types, understanding how to and understanding how to engage with them in different ways. And again, this requires both the data, the understanding and the ability to activate from a data perspective, but it also requires a new approach in terms of thinking about the role of creativity, of digital, of media in being that way of intervening and ultimately helping drive better behavior change with different audiences.
When you have conversations with some of Insagic's clients, do they know what they don't know? Do you deal with a different degree of sophistication? Are people in different places?
So when I look across, multiple clients, different clients are at different, stages of sort of the analytic or data-driven marketing maturity curve. Some are, really starting to just dip their toes in, really understand what are the types of things that we can learn about patients, about physicians through the use of, a combination of data science and social science. We have other clients that are, running really fast in terms of, working in a very agile way to start to bring to bear multiple messages from multiple audiences with multiple outcomes that they're trying to achieve that are nuanced for each one of those audiences. I would say today, many clients are right in the middle.
Okay.
Where data is a key piece of measurement strategy. Data is a key piece of some understanding of market dynamics, but data today isn't at the center of audience strategy, creative strategy, and media strategy brought together. And I think we're going to see that occur more and more and more over time, as the industry continues to evolve.
When you think about the tremendous amount of data that we have and that you can access and interpret on clients' behalf, what are some of the things that you see as both opportunities and challenges? What are some of the ways that you break things down that maybe are a little bit different than what we've done over the past couple of years?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges when leveraging real world data and large scale data to derive insights. One of the key pieces that we really make sure that we work with clients on is defining their key business questions, right? And so when we say key business question, we really mean two things. Ultimately, what is a question that if answered is going to drive impact, whether it's impact to business or impact to outcomes or impact to somebody's life. The other axis, though, and equally important when we're thinking in the marketing context, is understanding what is the degree of our ability to actually activate the answer to that question. Good key business questions sit at the intersection of those two big ideas. And so part of our work, really starts out by working with clients to understand, unearth, and really well define what those key business questions are to start with. And then from that, there are about 1 million ways that you can analyze this kind of data, whether it's, some very simple descriptive analytics to understand history, comparing different audiences based on different healthcare history, or comparing different consumer audiences based on different components and social determinants of health that you can see, right? Or you could go the complete opposite way and start to say, okay, well, let's actually leverage that data to derive predictive insights. So whether that's using machine learning or whether it's using cluster analysis, things like that enable you to leverage more of an algorithmic approach to answering those questions. But ultimately, it's still about bringing those questions to the heart of the business or the heart of the work, so that when we're thinking about ultimately the creative executions that we want to inform in terms of the learnings that we have or the audiences that we develop, or it's the impact on media in terms of where and what that context should be. Ultimately, we're bringing those key business questions, which are informed by outcomes, at the center. And so that's a really, really critical piece that we see. We also see that very often clients are looking to understand the propensity to do something, right? So,
Naturally.
So likelihood. So an example of this would be in a large disease state, let's say diabetes. Understanding of patients who are likely to have, or who have diabetes. Patient types that are likely to seek treatment versus not seek treatment, right? Or if we're talking about a rare disease, we're seeing a lot of promise in saying, how can we leverage that real world data to start to understand some of those clinical markers that actually predict rare disease or predict treatment of that rare disease so that you can speed up the path to diagnosis ultimately. And so, bringing that kind of mindset, I think, is important. But there's also another component that I think is really that we should be thinking about in balance with understanding propensity.
Okay.
And it's how we overlay diversity. One thing that we have seen time and time again is that propensity and diversity in certain categories and in certain disease states can be inversely related.
Huh.
Which
is almost a little bit counterintuitive, isn't it?
Well, it can be, but one of the things that we see is that there are gaps in healthcare in America, and it becomes very clear in this data. And so one of the really important things that I think we need to be thinking about, over time, is going just beyond one audience and understanding those most likely to do blank and hammering home. And that's great. That enables us to drive better ROI and all of those things. But we also need to think about how we build the right communications for everybody based on who they are. And having a data-driven understanding of that will go a long way to ensuring that we're really building engagement strategies that communicate with many people to ultimately help all drive better outcomes.
One of the things that struck me over the course of that last response was that a lot of people think about data and analytics as strictly a technical, as an engineer type pursuit, right?
Yeah.
But there's a great degree of creativity in what you're describing.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, this is an incredibly creative endeavor.
Yes.
Now, it requires a technical skill set,
Of course.
absolutely, right? I mean,
Price of admission.
it's a price of admission. It's the language we speak, right? We have to speak a technical language, but we need to be translators. We need to be active translators between an understanding of healthcare, an understanding of marketing, an understanding of business, and an understanding of data and data science. This is, by the way, a really difficult Venn diagram of skill sets when thinking about hiring.
We're going to make you draw it up after this.
Right? But all of this requires creativity, and it requires bringing a creative mindset to problem solving, and a creative mindset to, thinking in different ways about how you tackle a problem. It also requires, again, that active translation. It requires an active translation between understanding a client's business and understanding how that business challenge gets connected with the data. Okay. But it also requires another active translation entirely, and it's how do we then take the learnings from that and translate those learnings into enabling a better creative execution, or enabling a better media strategy, or in a perfect world, actually bringing those things together so that they're all working hand in hand. So yeah, there is a lot of creativity that is involved in this type of work.
All right. So much of what you've said so far has made me think a little bit about how there are so many different elements that come together. You have data science, you have social science. Tell me a little bit about the connectivity and why we haven't seen more of that previously.
Yeah. So, these two disciplines are, from a talent perspective, from a educational background perspective, from a how we tackle problems perspective, are ultimately, coming from very different backgrounds with very different tool sets. On one end, when we think about data science, right, we have the luxury with real world data and large sets of data to be able to analyze those data sets in
any number of ways,
right? And again, because this is built on real behaviors, real historical behaviors, there's a degree of reality and evidence that we can bring from that approach. That being said, there's a whole host of things that we can't learn from data science alone. I can't understand. There's no database of mindsets. There's no database of attitudes at scale in the same way that you would have, otherwise. There's no database of understanding what that lived experience really is through the eyes of an individual.
Okay.
And so this is where it's really critical that we're bringing these two disciplines together in an integrated way, so that we can start to really understand, there are a lot of things that we can learn about data. There are a lot of things that we can predict about behaviors in data, but there's not a lot of humanity in that alone.
Yes.
And there's also, there are some inferences about the why behind the what, but we don't really understand the why behind the what unless we actually talk to people, unless we actually start to ask people and understand what's happening. In addition, when you think about the value that the Verilog dialogue conversation brings to bear, this is an incredibly unique data asset, but it's also an incredibly unique set of social science-driven skills to help analyze that data, understand what's really happening in those conversations, what's left unsaid, what's happening between what's occurring between the lines, and how is that changing decision making. Again, as a data scientist myself by trade, I can tell you there's a lot of things that I can glean from reams of data, but there's a lot of questions like that I can't answer.
Yep.
And if we're able to bring those together, ultimately, again, the goal is to build a better engagement strategy for a given audience through creative, through media. That human understanding is a critical ingredient in ensuring that we're driving the right behavior change for the right audience.
Which, for one of our final questions, brings us back to Insagic. The Insagic offering, some of the things that we've talked about. Why is Insagic positioned in a way that's going to be able to do this better than pretty much anyone else out there?
So that comes down to a few things. So so Insagic is our insights and advisory business that is positioned at the center of Publicis Health, and our goal is to bring together again that data, dialogues, and design together so that we can help our clients thrive in the outcome economy. And so that requires a few things. It requires having the right talent positioned in the right way, right? So we have a multidisciplinary team of social scientists, of marketers, of data scientists, data architects, of privacy experts, folks that know how to bring these pieces together in disparate ways so that we can, ultimately unearth disruptive insights for clients from a multitude of perspectives. It also requires the platform. And so we have built what we believe is the industry's most advanced offering that brings together in HIPAA-compliant ways real-world health data, longitudinal data, in combination with our consumer data assets at Epsilon, which enables us to, again, better understand patients as people and understand people as patients so that we can drive that understanding, so that we can drive those audiences, and ultimately be able to activate in the marketplace. And so that all of our insights are activation ready from the start. What we also bring in that platform is the world's largest database of real patient-doctor dialogues, which again gives us a very unique view into the real-world evidence in terms of what is actually happening in those conversations. And
as opposed to kind of like the the pie in the sky version of it, where this is what we imagine is happening, this is what we want to think is happening.
Exactly. So our goal is to say, how do we bring real world insights and real world evidence to the center of how we understand patients and people and physicians, and ultimately how we're then designing in the marketplace to build better interventions to drive better behavior change, and hopefully help patients live better, healthier lives.
One last question for you, and this is kind of an unfair question, but crystal ball. Let's say we're having this conversation again in 5 years. Where do you want and where do you expect Insagic to be?
So I think a lot of the ideas that we're talking about today still, in some circles, probably feel future focused. I believe that in 5 years, the things that we're talking about today will be the norm.
Yes.
And I believe that the usage of data at the center of decision making is going to be the normal practice versus the exception. Now, you think about other things that are happening in the industry. You think about what's happening with generative AI and the either promise or threat, depending on your point of view.
Depending on where you're sitting, also. Right?
Depending on where you're sitting, that brings. Ultimately, I do think that we are going to see an evolution of technologies like that. Whether they are at the center of how we're doing things, or if they become a tool, my opinion is that that we are going to see, these new tools becoming an enabler for being able to enable different levels of content, or different or being able to empower dynamic content at scale. Mm-hmm. But again, as a tool, in the same way that Photoshop is a tool for creative teams today, even pre the new versions of Photoshop that actually bring generative AI in.
The antique ones,
right? So so I do think we're thinking about this data-driven foundation is really critical, because it gives us the insights to understand the unique nuances in different groups of people, so that we can ensure that we're communicating with them effectively, right? That I think will become a foundational component. And then as to the way that we enable, the ability to build multiple versions of content for multiple individuals, it'll be really interesting to see how that model evolves over the next 5 years. In terms of how we're bringing together multiple technologies, different ways of working, different types of teams being brought together, multidisciplinary teams to really tackle that problem together. So I think I do think we're going to see a lot of movement in that space over the next 5 years, and it'll be really interesting to see how it evolves.
This stuff is fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be able to do this level of data-driven work within a creative environment, as personally as a data wonk myself, mm-hmm. Is one of the most interesting, fun, challenging jobs I think on the planet. And I think what makes it especially gratifying is the fact that ultimately we're not selling shoes, we're not selling gum. Right. We are trying to build a better understanding of people to help them engage more with their health, or engage more effectively with their health, so that they ultimately live healthier lives. And that to me is both incredibly challenging, incredibly fun, but incredibly rewarding.
Incredibly gratifying.
Yeah.
All right. Before the camera started rolling, we were talking a little bit about music. And since this is MM+M TV, we have one last question for you. What was the last song you listened to?
So, I don't know the song, but the last album I listened to. So Andrew Hill, he's a jazz mm-hmm. pianist. He recently passed away, unfortunately. I have been wanting to listen to his record called Judgment for quite many years, and I've never been able to get my hands on it. Mm-hmm. I finally found a copy, and so last night I listened to Judgment by Andrew Hill, and it is, if you're a jazz fan, it's a little bit out there, but it's a really great listen.
Okay. People learned a lot here. They learned about jazz, and they learned about what Insagic and so much of what you're doing. Kevin, this was a blast. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. And for MM+M TV, my name's Larry Dobrow. Thanks for watching, and be well.